In this episode of Finding Hope in Your Finances, Amy and I would love to share our personal story with you. It's taken us a while to get to this place where we can share this story because, like Amy said in episode 1, there was a time when we felt so much shame and embarrassment over the place we had gotten to with our money. But now we think that that is a place that can help others, and so we want to share our story with you. So our story begins when we got married. We got married very young. Amy was 21 and I was 20.
And he always loves to talk about that, so let's get it out. I'm a little bit older. Let's move on.
It was just a couple of months, but the reason I like to talk about that is because she was my legal guardian for a couple of months. And so it goes back to the apple in the garden. It's all her fault. She started this whole mess, right? But we were college students, and so we were working part-time-ish, full-time-ish jobs and also going to college. And so what that meant is we had living expenses, and we lived fairly simply, but we also had college tuition expenses. And so how we got through those next 4 or 5 years of our undergraduate degrees and then also our graduate degrees is by taking out school loans and living on credit cards. And so during those years, you can imagine we racked up a considerable amount of school loan debt and credit card debt. And we're also not going to sit here and tell you that all of our credit card debt was sensible debt. While we lived simply, we probably made some purchases that we probably shouldn't have made while we were in those days.
But I do want to clarify, shoes are essential. So anyone watching this, please write that down as a note. Shoes are essential, but other things he's talking about, probably not.
A pair of shoes is essential.
Shoes are essential.
20 pairs of shoes are not necessarily essential, right? Okay.
Next point.
So here's how it goes. So we graduated from college, and we both had master's degrees. We both got jobs making more money than we had ever seen in our entire lives. We would bring home our checks, and in those days you actually brought home a check. It wasn't direct deposit. And we would just stare at them for a while because it was more money than we had ever seen before. And so what did two people with master's degrees making the kind of money we had never made before do with that kind of money?
We spent it.
You would think that we paid off our debt, put money in savings, but nope, we spent it. We bought cars, we bought a house, we bought furniture,
and shoes. We bought shoes.
And we did most of that, not only neglecting the debt that we had, but assuming more debt, even though we were making more money than we had ever made before in our lives. And then, not long after, we made the decision to start a family. And so we were expecting our first child. And during that season, and this has always kind of been a dream of ours, we didn't just start that conversation during that season, but we wanted Amy to stay home with our kids. And during that season of life, she worked a few part-time jobs, but for the most part, she stayed home while our kids were not yet in school. And so we went from 2 incomes to 1 income, but we still had all the debt that we had accumulated while we were in college and even post-college, and we hadn't really made a dent in any of that debt since we got out of college. And so now all of a sudden, we went from being able to make our minimum monthly payments on all of our debt, which we thought we were handling very well, to struggling making those minimum monthly payments.
And so, we added diapers, we added all those expenses.
And diapers are expensive. And so all of these extra expenses from having a child, now being down in income and having all this debt. And so, as we shared in episode 1 in the wise words of Warren Buffett, the tide went out and we were the ones swimming naked because all of a sudden we realized we were in a lot of trouble in our finances. And it was a shameful place. It was an embarrassing place. I remember one of the things that hit me the hardest was when I got a call from Amy. One day I was at work, I believe, and I got a call, and she was not happy because the check that we had written, if there are millennials or Gen Z who are listening, checks are paper things that we didn't have debit cards, and so that's how we spent money, was checks. And we'd written a check for our kids, for our oldest one's PDO, and it was hot. It bounced. And when Amy walked in that day, they had to let her know that our check was not good. And so obviously that was embarrassing. And I remember being on the other end of that phone call and thinking, we can't continue to live this way. We've got to do something different. We can't continue to live in this place of having more month than money every time around. And so some good friends of ours, we were in a small group together with them, and we had entrusted them with our story and with our testimony. And they invited us to this seminar. It was called Conquering Debt God's Way. Bruce Ammons actually became a very good friend of ours, but he was a leader of the seminar, and he was giving the seminar at their church, and they said, you've got to come to the seminar, got to come to the seminar, got to come to the seminar. And we weren't too excited about going to the seminar. And it brings up a good point, though, because sometimes you can live in this place of not living the hope and dream in your finances, but not really wanting to take that step to do anything different or to get out of it. And we found ourselves in that place. And I don't really know why. Some of it may be because of the shame or the embarrassment. But we hesitantly went to the seminar. In fact, we were late. We missed like the first session and a half of the seminar. In fact, I do remember thinking, I don't remember if it was a suggested donation or if it cost like $15. $15. And that was one of the reasons we were like, no, we're not going to go to that, because it costs money to learn how to manage our money. That didn't make any sense to me. That seminar was a lifesaver for us. Yeah. It really taught us some principles that we began to apply in our life that brought us to that place of dreaming of finding hope in our finances.
It was really practical. That's one of the things I remember about it, is it gave us really great tools to implement and start immediately to try to get a change. And we're going to talk about those as we move through this series. And that was something that really gave me some hope, is that there were things, very tangible things we could try to do immediately to change the course we were on, instead of, hoping that things would get better later on.
Mm-hmm. So in episodes 3 and 4, we're going to talk about some of those very practical things. Yeah. Episode 5 will be a little bit different, but episodes 3 and 4, very practical, just no nonsense kind of things that you can do that will make a huge difference in helping you find hope in your finances. We began to implement those things that we learned, those very practical, tangible things. And in implementing those things, we saw miracles. We began to lay our head on our pillow at night and not worry as much about finances. And not only that, really began to give thanks to God for what He was doing in our life of transforming us. Number one, because we realized we weren't alone. When we went to that seminar, we realized that there were a lot of people who were living in the same place that we were. People that we knew personally that we didn't know were living in the same place that we were. Mm-hmm. Number two, we learned that while it was okay to not be okay, it wasn't okay to stay that way. That we had to make some changes, we had to make some differences. And number three, we started talking about it. We started bringing it into the light. And when we did that, God began to transform the way that we lived with our finances. And so all of a sudden, we can start telling you about these miraculous stories, and seriously miracles that happened because we started living out biblical principles to get out of debt and handle our money the right way. So as we were talking about this, one of the memories that we had was our car needed some repair, and it was around $200. And the day we found out that we needed to make that repair, I went to get the mailbox, just to get the mail out of the mailbox, and there was an envelope. It was anonymous, and there was $200 cash in that envelope. And no one knew we had this need. I just found out how much the car was going to cost, and I thought, my goodness, here it is. The Lord is just meeting this need. And it was so encouraging, because I felt like, okay, we're trying to change things. We're trying to live in a different way. And so that's not the only miracle. I mean, we had several others. We had a time where Ryan called in on this random radio station that we didn't listen to, and somehow he got picked. And every hour that he was still on, I can't even remember what it was, every hour that he was picked, we won money. And he was on there for like half a day or a day. And so we ended up, and this was in December, we ended up being able to pay for all of our Christmas through this random radio prize that he won. And we got this cash, and it covered all of our Christmas that year. We did not have to do anything on a credit card or anything. All of our needs were met in that way. And we have other stories like that we could tell that just, they really were miraculous, and they were so encouraging. That's one of the first times that I felt like the Lord was seeing us, seeing where we were, our situation, and
and just wanting us to know He was right there with us and He was going to help meet our needs.
Yeah, and we just want to encourage in that, because it was the small steps that we started taking to find hope in our finances that began to open the door for some of those things. And in episode 5 of this series, we're going to talk about giving. And here in our story, we want to share with you that we began to give. So when we were in the Conquering Debt God's Way seminar, one of the things we heard was, you need to give. And we were like, that makes no sense at all. Like, we're strapped financially. We have more month than we have money. And you're telling us that you want us to begin to give. And so, and Amy and I had both been raised in the church. We had both been taught on the principles of tithing and giving offerings. But we had also rationalized in our head, because we also knew God's principle was, don't be in debt. Don't live in bondage to anyone else. And so we began to rationalize, well, God doesn't want us to live in debt, but He also wants us to give, but let's prioritize getting out of debt and not giving. But we began to give, and I believe our giving is what opened the door for some of those miraculous things to happen. When we began to lay our head on our pillow at night and not have financial worries every single night, I'm not saying that still doesn't happen some. When we began to do that, I'm going to say this not to brag on ourselves, but we went from not being able to make a minimum monthly car payment to, at one point, we actually gave one of our cars away. And again, I don't say that to brag on us, but I say that because I want you to know it is possible. You can find hope in your finances. You can move from a place of living in bondage with money to living in freedom with money. So much freedom that you can give generously without even having to think about it. And we want to encourage you in that. So in the next 2 episodes, episode 3 and episode 4, we're going to talk about how to make these very practical changes in your finances. It's really easy. We're going to talk you through it. And then in episode 5, we'll talk specifically about the whole giving piece. And we hope that you'll stick with us to learn those things. Again, we don't proclaim to be experts here. We learned the hard way. God did a lot of great things in our story, and we share that with you because we hope that He will do the same thing in your story.